So my niece was 5 years old, and she looks at me and she says, "Aunt Kathy, what do you do for work?" And I thought, how do I explain independent fundraising consultant to a child? But then I realized, oh, I can just tell her the same thing I would say to any adult. And I said, I teach people how to ask for money and get it. And she said, teach me. And I thought, I don't need to teach her. A 5-year-old already knows everything about asking for money. They create relationships. They ask for something specific. They tell you what they're going to do with it. They keep asking until they get an answer out of you. They give you a big hug when you say yes. And if you say no, a lot of times they'll look sadly at the ground, but they'll say, that's okay. I know that you still love me. We forget all of that. We grow up and we go through bad fundraising, car wash, bake sale, Girl Scout cookies. I'm sorry to any Girl Scouts, but Girl Scout cookies are terrible because you spend several minutes debating samosas or Thin Mints and you don't know what Girl Scouts does. And because you have this whole conversation about cookies, you never learn that 70% of female United States senators were Girl Scouts. You never hear that they turn girls into leaders because you're having a conversation about cookies. And so you give them $20 when you might have given them $50 if they made the case for why they needed money. And out of that $20, the troop might get $3. And so that's how we're taught fundraising. So we take what children naturally know about how to ask for money and we wipe it all out and we talk about transactions instead of transformation. So the transaction is, and the raffle ticket is $150 and you can win the $1 million dream house. That's a transaction. Transaction is, and tickets to the dinner are $350 or $650 for couples because we discriminate against individuals. And there's going to be a silent auction. And we're going to have a cabin in the woods. And it's a transaction. And you walk in and you have no idea what the organization does, why it's important. And you spend 4 hours there. And at the end of it, you don't know what's the organization, what do they do, and why it's important. So that's a transaction. And that's most fundraising that you see. It's just the adult version of the car wash and the bake sale. A transformation is, at the end of an hour, you walk out of that room, you can name the organization, you can name 3 things that they do and why it's important. And in an ideal world, you had choice on how much money you gave. And the really remarkable thing is when you give people choice on how much money to give, they write checks for vastly larger amounts than anything you would have had the courage to ask for. So I'll regularly do a luncheon, and I don't think I would have the brass ovaries to have a luncheon ticket for, say, $175. That would be really hard. You know, having to sell tickets and having to put tables together where everybody at that table paid, you know, $175. If I say to people, it's a free lunch, come and see what we do. If you choose to give money, you will choose the amount. It is a fundraiser, but you can walk out of there without giving it. It's our job to move you. People will write checks for $1,000. So I couldn't sell them a $175 ticket, but if I give them choice, they'll write a check for $1,000. And on top of that, we say, and we would like you to make a 5-year commitment. People will make 5-year commitments for $1,000 a year, so I don't have to keep asking people again. Pretty simple, but we're spending so much time on the transactional nature of fundraising, the cookie and the gala and the golf tournament, that we forget about the transformation of here's this work, here's why it's important. Let us help you be emotionally moved by this because we're emotionally moved. We choose to participate in this for a reason. We're so busy with the transaction that we forget the transformation. So let me ask you something. Why do people give money? What is the number one reason why somebody will give money to a cause?
Personal connection.
Personal connection. That's very good. It's not the number one reason, but it is very good. Personal connection is right up there.
They like the cause. They like the person asking.
They like the cause, they like the person asking. Also, really, right up there, but it's not the number one reason. Tax deduction, no, that is like way down. Tax deduction has nothing to do with you or your cause. And actually, huge numbers of people just take the standard deduction, so they don't even get a tax deduction for giving to you. Number one reason.
Is it guilt?
Guilt, sometimes it's guilt. I had a boss who used to say, fear, greed, guilt, or exclusivity. But yeah, you can use guilt, it's not a top reason. The number one reason why people give money is because they are asked. I know, it's revolutionary. So I learned this lesson. I was teaching fundraising in Amherst, Massachusetts. It's Amherst, Massachusetts. It's Amherst, New York. Things you learn by traveling to teach fundraising. Amherst, Massachusetts, and I had been using this same cute little thing for years. I said at the time, oh, Bosnia, I'd like to help the people of Bosnia, but I never think to go and look up who's working in Bosnia. And two people in the class raised their hand and said, we're from Friends of Bosnia? I said, ask me for money. At the end of the day, I will give you money. And at the end of the day, I spent 8 hours teaching them fundraising. At the end of the day, two people walk up and the guy says, we'll write you a letter and ask you for money. It's like, oh, I just spent an entire day teaching this. But the woman says, no, she said she would give us money. And she said, for every $1 donated to us, $17 worth of food and medical supplies goes to Bosnia. Did I write a check? You bet. Because she asked me. I had every intention. After that, I stopped using that particular expression. Because I had learned my lesson. Don't. Yeah, if you start saying that enough, people will actually, ask you for money, which is okay. Fundraisers are a soft touch. But key lesson, he was about to walk out of there without a check because he was afraid to ask for money. So what I'm going to teach you applies to whether you are asking for a cause or whether you're asking for yourself. But the number one thing you have to do is ask. How many people do you know who they never get a raise? They're very angry that they never get a raise. And you say, well, what have you done to get a raise? Well, they should know to give me a raise. That's not, you didn't ask. So number one thing that you want to do is ask people, is ask people for money. And ask them in a way that connects them to you and to the organization. Create a personal relationship. So, the most effective thing you can do to ask for money is to sit people down and talk about the cause and engage them and ask for money. You can do this in large groups. You can do this in small groups. You can do this one-on-one. Everything that takes you away from the purity of doing that results in less money. The closer you are to a person when you ask them for money, the more likely they are to give. So people will say to me, well, what if we put an ad in the newspaper? How far are you away from somebody when you put an ad in the newspaper? So there was one cause, and they got I think a 4-page spread in Parade magazine, and at the time it went to 28 million households, the ideal, the fantasy, and it said specifically that they needed money. And from 28 million people reading that, they got $7,000 because you're too far away. Direct mail is a little bit better. I've done millions of pieces of direct mail in my life. You're not really closer, but at least they feel like I am one person, you are one person, we are, they have some time to consider it. You can get a good return on investment. Telemarketing works better. Nobody likes telemarketing. I had a whole career running a national program for telemarketing. Completely useless. Nobody likes telemarketing. But it's a little bit closer than direct mail. The large room of people, now there's somebody standing in front of them, you can do a presentation, you can make a lot of money with a large room of people. Small room of people, if you need to raise just a couple of $1,000s for a cause, put together a room full of people like this, say it's an hour, invite them to come over. Politicians do this all the time. Come over for coffee and dessert. Come over, we'll have a little bit of tea. Come over for bagels and orange juice. Hear what the politician says. The politician comes in, does 20 minutes, somebody from the House stands up and says, you all know why you're here, let's support this candidate is wonderful, everybody, here's the hat, and you ask for money. You can pick up $1,000 or $2,000 that way for any cause. But the nice thing is it's repeatable. You could do that over and over. You could do this 5 times in a weekend without even thinking hard. Every house match up with 2 hosts, the homeowner and someone else. They invite their friends, and frankly, whatever your house can hold, invite about 5 times as many people. Because about 80% of people either don't like the cause or they just can't make it. Do not even a 1-hour presentation. Tell people it'll be an hour. Some people will just come to us to see if you can really keep it to an hour. Yeah, one of my #1 comments I get from people is, wow, it really was an hour. I was amazed. 15 minutes, enjoy a little snack, hors d'oeuvres, cocktails, sit down, do the presentation, ask for money, a little bit more, talking to other people, and you're out. Very simple. And whatever it made, it didn't cost you that much to do. You know, what does bagels and orange juice cost? It doesn't really cost you anything. Split it between 2 hosts, you're done. So everything's profit. And we think that fundraising should be more complicated or dramatic or something. So I had my Rotary Club was doing the bike-a-thon, and they were looking to get like 1,800 bicyclists together, and they didn't, and it was, you know, it wasn't as many people, but they raised $5,000, but it was an 8-hour bike-a-thon, and the volunteers had to be there all day, and people were sunburnt, and they weren't very happy, but they did raise the money. I said, okay, just have the local museum, host some hors d'oeuvres, have people come. It was an hour, so you didn't have to spend 8 hours, and we raised the same $5,000. Nobody had to ride a bike. Nobody had to, you know, and everybody walked out of there, whether they gave money or not, and they knew what the cause was and why it was important, and that was the whole thing. So if you're going to do that kind of fundraising, very easy. You want 2 hosts. One person has the house, one person doesn't have the house. In any particular group, about half of the people don't have the house. They don't have parking, or the place is a mess, or their husband hates having people over, it doesn't matter. But any 2 people, one person has the house. So the other person now has to do the hard job of asking for money. And you arrange for a speaker from the organization, and you invite all your friends. So if the house can hold 15 people, if you've got couches and chairs, and 15 is pretty reliable, you each have to invite about 37 or 38 people. Together you're going to invite 75 people, which is very nerve-wracking because the house only holds 15. But 15 people end up coming over. You can have somebody from the organization, or one of the 2 of you can present what does the organization do. You do not need the PowerPoint, the screen. You can pass around pictures. You can have some foam board up that shows what the organization does. You really don't need anything too elaborate. So people come in, you could do this 5 times in a weekend. You do wine and cheese Friday night, bagels and OJ Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon you can have tea, Saturday evening you can have cocktails, Sunday morning you can go back to croissants and coffee. You could do this with little chocolates and do it as a dessert. Very simple. And you tell people it's an hour, and if they've got kids and you've got kids, you put all the kids in the backyard with a couple of babysitters, and you let them run around screaming and making noise. And you do the presentation. Ideally, if you are helping people, you have a testimonial. So somebody stands up, does the presentation, somebody else does the testimonial. Here's how this organization has helped me. And now the co-host is going to ask for money. And the co-host is going to ask for money in such a way that everybody can participate. So you know your crowd of people. I suggest $3 amounts. So the first dollar amount is anyone in that room could probably write a check for that amount. And the second dollar amount is somebody in that room can write a check for that amount. And the third dollar amount is if the whole room together can raise this third dollar amount, here's what we would do with it. So in the case of Rotary, to give you an example, they are doing polio vaccine in the third world. It's now down to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. And it used to be India, and India now hasn't had a polio case in a couple of years. It's 60 cents for a dose of polio. Somewhere in the world is going to be the last child to have polio, and then it will be wiped from existence. We did it with smallpox. There is no smallpox in the world. Nobody has to have the problems of smallpox. Well, guess what? We solved polio. We just have to get it wiped out in these 3 countries. And it's important to us because somebody in Pakistan is only 2 plane rides away from you. So if there's polio anywhere in the world, there can be polio where you live. And we learned this from Disneyland. Somebody showed up with measles and then dozens of people got measles. So it behooves us to cure polio somewhere else. It's 60 cents for a vaccine. So if I was asking a room full of people, I would say for $60, 100 vaccines to poor children. So someone in this room, anyone in this room could do $60. Then I would say, okay, so for $300, 500 vaccines. And if this whole room could do, say, $1,200, then we could help 2,000 children. There will be 2,000 children we will never meet. But you can make a difference in a child's life. And here are the forms, here are the envelopes. You know why you were invited here. Write your check. We'll take credit cards and we'll wash them through the square. But please give.
Who could say no?
Who could say no? Yes, my goal is to make you cry. If I can make you cry, a little tear coming to the eye, you absolutely want to give. You want to participate in something that's bigger than you are. You want to go home at night and say, honey, I heard this thing today. Did you know that there's now only 3 countries that have polio? We're this close to wiping out polio worldwide. It could be us. It could be my donation. You want to do that. Once you're past 30, you know the route you take home from work. You know the other route you take home when that route is clogged. You know who your 3 best friends are. You know who to call if you have a flat tire in the middle of the night. Your life is kind of boring. And then you come across this thing, this new thing that you never thought you could be passionate about, but you could be passionate about this. This is amazing that there is this exciting, interesting, different thing that somebody else is passionate about, and they share that passion with you, and you want to do this. So that's really a very simple way to raise money. Anyone can do it. The quickest I've ever seen somebody put together a party like that was Monday morning at 7 a.m. The group came together and they weren't going to make payroll Friday. So they pulled together people by Friday and they raised $10,500 from a room full of people. And then the following Saturday they had it at a church. Nobody was a donor. It was Seventh-day Adventists, and somebody had come in the day after the party and said, hey, we're going to still need money. They had it a week later. $2,400 from people who weren't connected to the cause, didn't know anything about the cause, but stay after services next week. But the nice thing is endlessly repeatable. Very simple to do, very low cost, actually pretty low effort. Cleaning the house, having people for an hour, cleaning the house afterwards, somebody buying the groceries, sitting down with Evite and figuring out how to invite your friends. Really simple, endlessly repeatable. You don't have to plan for the party for 6 months. You don't have to get the silent auction items. And the main thing is everybody walks out of there and they know what you do and they know why it's important. And just the having to put together a presentation that will move people and make them want to cry forces you to think about what we do as an organization, which when you're busy selling the silent auction tickets, the gala tickets, the golf tournament tickets, you forget what it is that you need to say that will move people emotionally. You forget that you have a cause that people can be moved emotionally about. So this actually returns you to talking about the cause in a way that engages people. The same event you can use, take out the ask for money and instead put in an ask for we need board and committee members. Instead of in the Evite saying it will be a fundraising event, there will be an ask for money, you say this is an event to learn about volunteer leadership opportunities within our organization. and invite everybody who's a potential board member. Now you don't have to have the, oh, who do we know who could be on our board? No, invite 10 people in, see who shakes out, pick up some more board members. And there are people who think your cause is interesting and are engaged by what you're actually doing, as opposed to they know somebody and their arm was twisted and they were dragged in. So once you do these kinds of events, it actually becomes easier to do any other kind of fundraising, because you know what is it that you say in a way that engages people. Take out the ask for money, and you can do this as a tour of your organization. You can have it in your offices if you have offices to show off, or you could do it in anyone's home. And you can say to people, this is not a fundraising event, but we would like you to come in and hear what we do. And all we ask is that you be open to a follow-up phone call. So now you can engage people for other things. I've used this for volunteers. Instead of every time somebody calls up and they want to volunteer and you have to do a particular presentation for that one person, no, get everybody in at once. So I volunteered for an organization that needed 200 or 300 volunteers to come in every week, every year. And they always had needs for replacement. So people would call up, I'd like to volunteer, and the volunteer coordinator would have to give them a tour and tell them what they did and get them involved and follow up with them to see if they wanted to volunteer. And 60 people in a year, which was the replacement that they needed, took 60 hours. Change that to 2 tours a month and say, somebody calls up and you say, well, we're doing a tour and it's going to be next Tuesday at 5:30. Would you like to come? We have another one after that on the following Thursday. Would that work better for you? Now, it's 2 tours a month. It's 24 hours a year instead of 60 hours a year. It's the same presentation, just without the ask for money. Maybe you have the testimonial speak. So I volunteered for this organization for 20 years, and it was pretty much 15 years before I ever met anyone who had been helped by the organization. They helped blind and dyslexic students. Once they started doing the tours, they'd bring in 1 kid a month to talk about how they were helped by the organization. That was amazing. Now I got to actually meet the people that I'd been helping for years. So the testimonial is important. So if you switch to this kind of fundraising, suddenly you lower your costs, because the gala and golf tournament are expensive. You increase the amount of money you raise. You increase the number of people who feel connected to your organization. You know now how it is that you say things in such a way that engages people. So you can do this at the big event as well. And you can bring in 100, 200, 300, 400 people at a time, 500 people at a time, and do pretty much the same presentation and make pretty much the same ask for money. And the one change you make in that is you ask for 5-year commitments. And people will give you 5-year commitments. So you ask them for a gift and you ask them for a 5-year commitment, and you solve the biggest problem that your nonprofit organization has. There's always this end of year closeout of like, oh, we've got to make the goal. Oh, the fiscal year ends on the 30th. We've got to make the goal. And then comes the 1st and you open up the new fiscal year and you still need money. And you start at 0 again. If instead you ask people for 5-year commitments, you don't start at 0 again. Once you make this one change, it's breathtaking. Because the thing is, your donors were always completely willing to make 5-year commitments. You just never asked them. But instead of pretending like you have to keep asking the same people over and over and you have to keep proving yourself, now you just make the case for, we would like a 5-year commitment. We're going to be doing this work in 5 years. Will you come along with us for 5 years? And plenty of people will come along with you for 5 years. Maybe not their first gift, sometimes their first gift, but maybe a later gift. But because we never asked that, key lesson, you've got to ask, because we never ask that one thing, we don't get 5-year gifts. If you look at your own personal giving, you were probably giving to the same causes 5 years ago. If somebody 5 years ago had said to you, would you mind making a commitment for 5 years? You would have said, sure, count me in, I'll be here. But we never asked for that. So large events, small events, one-on-one. Once you have the idea of how you talk about your cause, now you can just go and meet with people. If you made as your goal to have tea or coffee with 3 people a week, you would meet with 150 people a year. But we never have time for doing that because we're so invested in the gala and the golf tournament that we never just sit down with people. But let's say you're going to sit down with people. I would suggest you send 2 people in. So it could be the executive director and a board member. Or it could be a board member and the fundraiser. Or it could be 2 volunteers. Ideally, it would be at least 1 volunteer because they're a peer. But you could send them in with a program person. The one key thing you have to do is have some agreement. What's your goal of the meeting? If the goal of the meeting is to ask for money, you need to ask for money. And the one thing that people fail to do a lot of these times is they chicken out from asking for money. The donor knows why you're there. You know why you're there. None of this is a secret. And so when you go in and not ask for money, you leave and they look at the spouse and say, well, that was a little weird. Why were they here if not to ask for money? They were ready to write you a check. You chickened out. So you're in the meeting. Let's say you divide the meeting into thirds. The first third should be just getting to know each other. So why do you think this cause is important? What is it about this cause that appeals to you? So my name is Kathy, and there used to be a doll called the Chatty Kathy doll, and you'd pull this little string. When you ask somebody, why is this cause important to you? It's like pulling the string. They will just go on and on. They will tell you about it. And what you're listening for is the one thing. Because usually there's 3 things, 4 things that you do in an organization, and there's one thing that appeals to them. And so you want to find out what's that one thing. What's the thing that they care about more than anything else that you do? So we call this in fundraising listening the gift. And listening the gift means pay attention. So you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that ratio. And this is the same if you're in a business meeting and you want them to sign the contract. Listen for what it is that they need. Don't just assume that you know what they need. Listen to what they are saying. In an ideal way, if you go into a store, this same thing would happen. And the salesman coming up to you and saying, hey, you look like you want a TV. Let me sell you a TV. I'm not walking out of here before you buy a TV. That would be terrible. So instead, you want to listen. So you listen for what's important to them. And that would take up, ideally, the first third of the meeting. The second third is you're going to actually ask them for money. Don't wait till the end. Ask them for money in the middle. Tell them, okay, so I hear this thing is important to you. Let me tell you what we're doing on that. And then if the meeting's divided into thirds, the final third is reconnecting to them. But let's say you're going to ask them for money. So what you want to do is when you get to the point where you're going to ask them for money, ask for the dollar amount, and then shut up. First to speak loses. So if you just wait, somebody will say something eventually. They might say that's a lot of money, but they just want to hear from you that that's a lot of money. They're not negotiating yet. If you say to them, say the sentence might be, would you invest $10,000 a year for the next year in this cause? And then you shut up. But if you don't shut up, if you say, well, of course, that's too much money, in which case we'd be happy to have whatever you want to give, you will walk out without a check. So you say the dollar amount and you shut up, and eventually they will say something. The longest I've ever gone personally was 54 seconds. We're just looking at each other. He's looking at me, I'm looking at him, he's looking at me. At some point he was just gaming me. He just wanted to see. Finally he says, well, I guess this changes everything. And that's okay. And then I got what I wanted. So there's only a couple of answers after that. Yes, maybe, or no. So let's say they say yes. And let's say they say yes too quickly. It means you asked for too little money. But you can look at them and say, each year for the next 5 years. And now you can get a 5-year commitment. But if they say yes, say thank you. But you can also ask them for something else. And you have a beautiful home here. would you also, in addition, to consider hosting an event for your friends, and we'll bring some of our donors and we'll ask people for money, and you'll get it, because they're already signed up to say yes, and they said yes easily. Ask them for something else. If they say maybe, there's a couple of ways you can handle that. One way to do it would be to say, okay, can I ask what your thoughts are? Or you could say, you know, because a lot of times they'll say, maybe I have to ask my chief financial officer, which for a lot of male donors is their wife. Say, okay, when should I check back with you? And you get out your schedule book and actually get a date. She'll be home the day after tomorrow, call me Friday. And those are people who actually mean it. But sometimes they'll say maybe when they really mean no and they just don't want to say no. So you can say to them, you can also say, if somebody says no, you can say, may I ask you 4 questions? And a lot of times they'll say yes to 4 questions just to see if it's 4 questions. And you say the 4 questions are, is it the organization? And usually it's not, because they accepted a meeting with you. And then you say, is it the project? And it might be the project. It might be if you didn't listen to the gift correctly, you missed what they really cared about. Or somebody was breaking your arm, oh, we got to ask for this is much more important, and it's not the thing that speaks to them. You can say, is it the amount? And a lot of times that's the sticking point. That's really where they're stumbling. And then you can negotiate. And the 4th question, which is really hard, is it me? And sometimes it's you. I've had donors, male and female, who didn't want to be asked by a woman. Okay, send in a man. Send in somebody cute. I mean, that hurts, but it's not really personal. It was a 50-50 grab whether I got the X or the Y chromosome, you know. Or they just don't feel bonded to you. Or you can send in somebody else who they're really bonded to, and that person will succeed. You ask those 4 questions, that'll help you get clarity on a maybe or a no. So yes, maybe or no. And in a way, as a fundraiser, I don't really care what the answer is. I'm only playing a numbers game. If I see 150 people in a year and 100 or 120 say yes, that's really all I need. If I don't see those people, I don't get that. If I'm spending all my time on grants or other kinds of fundraising that are not effective, the golf tournament, I mean, I hate to pick on golf tournaments, but really, unless you are teaching children how to play golf, you have no business running a golf tournament to raise money. It takes all your time, you have a lost opportunity cost. And again, same thing in business. If you're spending all of your time fixing the computer printer because you don't want to spend $95 for an hour to bring in a guy who can fix the computer printer in an hour, you can't go out and ask for contracts. If you're spending all of your time on the task you could pay somebody $10 or $20 for, you lose the opportunity to go out and ask for the $1,000 or $10,000 contracts, same in fundraising. And a lot of times we'll spend $3 to save $1. My travel agent costs $25 to book a flight. Why is it worth my time to go on the computer for 2.5 hours when I could just pay her to do it? You know, why am I running, you know, why would I run my own accounting to figure out my taxes? There's somebody who I can pay money to do that, and they make less than I do. So these are lost opportunity costs, same thing in fundraising. So I'm going to wind it up here by saying that if you get one thing out of this presentation, it's ask individuals for money with 5-year commitments. Don't spend your time on the things that take too much time, cost too much money, raise too little money. Just do the same thing with excellence, repeatable, and learn how to talk about your causes, and people will give you as much money as you want. And now I'll take questions.